Welcome into another episode of Picante, Peacock and Aponte. Today, we are going to talk about how similar, almost mirror images in certain ways, the Miami Dolphins and San Francisco 49ers are in 2024 and how that translates to where they are in the season. Stick around right after this. Welcome everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Brian Peacock. This is Peacock and Aponte, or as the kids call it, Picante. Brian, how are you today, buddy?
I'm doing all right, man. This is a very trying season, I think, for a lot of reasons, but we're getting through it. And hey, still mathematically in this thing, Jason.
1% is better than 0%. Insert
right.
here, Dumb and Dumber gift. So you're telling me there's a chance. But before we get into all the similarities and everything between the Miami Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers, a little quick injury update. Sounds like Isaac Guerrendo's not going to play in this game. Trent Williams is likely not going to play for the rest of the season, as reported earlier. So I wouldn't expect to see him on Sunday. Anyway, Nick Bosa did not practice today. Probably sounds more like a maintenance day going into Sunday. But for all intents and purposes, that's not the worst injury report we've heard all season. But here we go with another running back. So for fantasy football purposes, Brian Peacock, if you're in your fantasy playoffs and Isaac Guerendo's not there, are you taking a chance on Patrick Taylor against this really tough Miami Dolphins run defense?
Yeah. For my fantasy team, yes, because it started with Christian McCaffrey and just been scrambling for running backs all year long. And you even may or may not have been able to pick up Isaac Guerendo on waivers at some point during the season because Guerendo became valuable because Mason got hurt the same game that McCaffrey went out. And so you thought Mason would be the handcuff. Then all of a sudden it's Guerendo. Now it's Patrick Taylor. The 49ers are going to run the ball. Kyle Shanahan's going to try to run the ball. I think Patrick Taylor's a professional running back, and if you have no other starting running backs, you plug him in your lineup and you hope. But there's a chance. There's a lot of. I mean, it's not happening this year, but they're going to try again. There's going to be more wide back in this game as well, I assume.
Yes, a lot of Deebo Samuel, I would probably say. But two names that I would suggest, and this isn't a fantasy football podcast, if they're out there on your waiver wire, Kendry Miller of the Saints, it sounds like Alvin Kamara is going to be shut down for the rest of the season. And Jerome Ford, if he's out there, as Nick Chubb has been placed on IR, it's really just him and Pierre Strong in that backfield, even if Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be the quarterback for Cleveland.
You hope you're not in that position in the playoffs because now you're in the semis, right? If you're in your fantasy football playoffs right now, it's a rough place to be. And most people who drafted Christian McCaffrey probably aren't in their semis right now either if they're looking for handcuffs for a San Francisco 49ers running back.
100%. And just like fantasy football is a little bit of a bloodbath, this has been the story of the 49ers season. It's kind of been the story a little bit for the Miami Dolphins as well. They went through that time where Tua Tagovailoa wasn't available. The offense wasn't able to sustain itself. Words are hard. But this episode's about kind of mirror images of the 49ers and Dolphins. And it goes deeper than obviously the Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan connection. Goes deeper than the obvious 6-8 record that both have. Goes deeper than the fact that both teams were eliminated by the Kansas City Chiefs last season in the playoffs. Goes a lot deeper than that. In this game, what you're looking at for me is you're watching two teams that go about their business offensively in a way that nobody else in the league does. And they're very much committed to that. And what I mean by that, and I'll start with this, Brian. In terms of 21 personnel, right? 21 personnel, for the viewers at home that aren't aware, Brian, 21 personnel means
2 running backs, 1 tight end.
Okay, so Kyle Juszczyk, George Kittle, whoever else, Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo. Okay, so the league average expected points added, EPA, everybody's favorite advanced analytic, is 0.03 for the league average, but the usage of 21 personnel is 6.3%. The 49ers are number 1 and the Miami Dolphins are number 2. Let's check out these numbers. So the average usage is 6.3%. The 49ers, 36.9% with a 0.15 EPA that ranks 8th in the NFL from that personnel package. 0.34 EPA per pass, 0 EPA per rush, 44% pass rate. Miami, right behind them, 29.1% minus 0.08 EPA, 17th in the league. We might want to add that there was a long time where Tua Tagovailoa was not there. Snoop Huntley, Skylar Thompson was there as well too. That's a little bit of the context that you need. 0.16 EPA per pass, minus 0.26 EPA per rush, 40% pass rate. When you look at how the league uses that personnel package and you find out that the 49ers and the Dolphins are 1 and 2 with huge increases in that usage, what does that tell you, Brian?
It tells you that they came from the same place as coaches, and it tells you that they want to run the ball a little bit. And it's a run first offense when you have a fullback, when you're one of the few teams in the NFL that employs and actually utilizes a fullback often.
Right. And what's funny about it is, obviously, when Mike McDaniel was here, a lot of his contributions were as run game coordinator and then offensive coordinator before he was hired. And the way that he was adding wrinkles was creatively trying to find angles, using different window dressing. I think we're seeing Matt LaFleur take it to a whole new level this season in terms of the window dressing, and the 49ers kind of copying that a little bit further down the line. But for me, what this says is both of these offenses, regardless of the success rate, are sticking to what they know, what they think they're going to be successful for, what their personnel can dictate. And it's really interesting to see that they're 1 and 2 when everyone else in the league is less than 7% using 21 personnel. And both of these offenses are just saying, screw you guys, we're going to do what we want to do and do it out of this personnel.
And I'm on board with like zigging while the rest of the league is zacking, but it's not like these offenses are lighting the world on fire right now with their 21 personnel and their fullbacks on the field. So this, I just want to. This is a good demonstration of how few teams use fullbacks. And Alex Ingold is the fullback for the Miami Dolphins, and I'm looking at PFF right now, and Alex Ingold 46.3 PFF grade, not a great grade. And he ranks 7th out of 7. So there's only 7 fullbacks that are even graded right now in the NFL. So it's a dying position. There's not very many of them left. Kyle Juszczyk is usually one of the best, and actually I'll find out where he is. But only 7 are even graded, and Alex Ingold, the fullback for the Dolphins, is the worst of the 7. It's a small fraternity of NFL fullbacks right now.
Right. And off the top of my head, I can think of Patrick Ricard from Baltimore. But other than that, the fullback, it's a dying position. But the Dolphins, the 49ers, other teams, they're committed to it. And that's why Kyle Juszczyk's still around. They understand those things. Now, the NFL has gone into an offensive switch, I guess you could say, meaning a lot more spread out, a lot more wide receivers, right? Wouldn't you say? A lot more passing. I feel like a little bit more spread out, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the pass game as an extension of the run game. That's where you get away from the fullback, because you're throwing to that big slot receiver, you're throwing to a tight end, you're throwing to a wide receiver, you're throwing shorter stuff. And so, run game is there, but less about pounding it and trying to just move you off of the football. They're trying to find other ways to find space for their running backs and finding the path of least resistance. By the way, Kyle Juszczyk, 2nd of the 7 fullbacks, according to Pro Football Focus grades.
There you go. Not bad. Now, the league, while they don't run 21 personnel and they run it 7% close to that range, 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, is the wave of the future. 60.6% league average, 0.01 EPA. Can you take a guess where San Francisco and Miami rank in 11 personnel usage?
I would say the 49ers are much worse in 11 personnel this year than they have been in years past, when it was 3rd and Juwan as that 3rd wide receiver, as the big slot. I would imagine they're both ranked pretty low right now.
Well, I just mean in rate. Like, where do you think?
Oh,
where
rate.
do you think
Okay.
they are? Yeah. What do you think in rate?
Well, in rate, I would imagine they're pretty low, because if they're high in 21, that means they're pretty low in 11. Jason, I'm basic math. I was in the science and math Olympics when I was in elementary school, and I nearly flunked out of school like 3 years later, and couldn't pull the grades. So once it got beyond like integers, I was done with math.
By the way, science and math, my least favorite subjects. English and history were always at the top. But yes, you're absolutely right. The 49ers ranked 28th in 11 personnel, 46.2%. Miami 30th, 36.9%. So the league average EPA is 0.01. Again, expected points added. The 49ers are minus 0.02 EPA, which is 14th in the NFL, minus 0.06 EPA per pass, 0.05 EPA per rush, 62.2% pass rate, which shouldn't be a surprise. If you're in 3 wide receivers, you're probably not going to be running the football out of that. Miami, 0 EPA, just a good 0. It's a good round number. 13th in the league, which is right above the 49ers. Minus 0.04 EPA per pass. Remember, the Niners minus 0.06. 0.1 EPA per rush, 71.9% pass rate. It's almost like, again, mirror images. If you guys looked at the thumbnail, it's a Spider-Man meme just pointing at each other, like with these two offenses. It goes deeper than the coaching connection. It goes deeper than the record. It goes deeper than the injuries. Philosophically, offensively, this is who these guys are, and they're just not going to get away from that. Even with the Dolphins having Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, who we're going to find out probably tomorrow whether he's going to play. It sounded like he worked on the side today, and for a little while, Odell Beckham, Parker Washington. I know Malik Washington is there as well too. Jonnu Smith has had a career renaissance there. But they still don't get away from what they do well. And regardless of how this season's gone, they're committed to it. I think both sides are just committed to what they do, and they are convicted. I like that word because that's all John Lynch ever says to their philosophy.
They're a convicted group of people. Like, they decided something and they're going with it. That's what's going on. And obviously there has to be some similarities because you're not going to just completely stray all the way away from where you learned how to coordinate an offense in the NFL, from Mike Shanahan to Kyle Shanahan, and then all the other coaches in between, and what you've learned about offense and how to attack defenses. Like, these guys have been iron sharpening iron for a long time, trying to figure those things out. But so you would expect there to be some similarities, but it's pretty amazing how similar these teams are, from the quarterback to how they put the roster together to how do they utilize their talent and even their record. And it's just unbelievable. And it really makes me wonder why the Kyle Shanahan tree, because there's the Mike Shanahan kind of tree, but then there's like the Shanahan tree that I call the Kyle Shanahan tree, and I kind of put McVay in the Kyle Shanahan tree. But if you count Kyle's branches away from McVay's branches, the McVay side of the tree is doing really well this year. The Kyle Shanahan side of the tree is not doing as well. They're doing much like Kyle and Mike McDaniel are. And look at New Orleans and Clay Kubiak over there. Or is it Clint? It's Clint Kubiak, right? And Clay is still with the 49ers. And you look at Bobby Slowick, and maybe not the jump that you expected in year 2 with CJ Stroud for Bobby Slowick's offense in Houston. And so the Kyle Shanahan side, maybe they need to go back to the drawing board and look over at the McVay side of the tree and be like, what do you guys got going on over there? And McVay's side of the tree's got these nice little branches with a lot of leaves on it and little birdies making nests. And it's looked pretty bare on the branches on the Shanahan side of the tree this season. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just, coincidence, but it feels like there's something there.
And that was going to be my next question: is this whole thing figured out, right? Because I understand them sticking to what they need to do, and they feel good about that and everything. But it's just not working this season. The 49ers haven't had an issue moving the football up and down the field. It's been in the red zone. And if you want more similarities, that's exactly where I'm going with this one. So last year, Christian McCaffrey and Raheem Mostert scored all the touchdowns. They didn't score a few. They scored all the touchdowns. Every single one, essentially.
Yeah, every touchdown was scored by those two guys, basically.
If you did every single week anytime touchdown bets, Christian McCaffrey, Raheem Mostert, you probably hit every single week, right? Well, Raheem Mostert's a little banged up, but they were already moving towards Devon Achane. And obviously, we know what's going on with Christian McCaffrey. So last season, the 49ers ranked first in red zone, touchdown percentage, 68%. Miami was third, with Detroit right in the middle, 65.52%. Now, we all figured there's no way that can continue. You've got to regress a little. Well, you let me know if this is regression or if this is just the bottom falling out of it.
Yeah, this is the cliff.
Yeah. The 49ers have plummeted from 1st to 23rd, 52.94%. And Miami has fallen from 3rd to 12th, 58.14%. San Francisco averages 3.6 red zone trips per game. That's 10th in the NFL. And Miami averages 3.1, 19th in the NFL. The last 3 games has been far more efficient for both. The 49ers converted 66.67. That's 8th during that span. Remember, this is a 3-game sample size, and we're counting the game that they didn't get into the red zone against the Los Angeles Rams. Can't lower your red zone percentage without
100%.
getting there, right? And Miami is at 60%, 13th during that span. Of course, Tua's back, and the offense looks more competent. And aside from this Houston game, the Miami offense looked like it was supposed to be all year, right? Like Tua had thrown like 2 interceptions in this game, but he hadn't thrown one in a bunch of games. But the red zone offense too. So a little bit more back to, well, why is this not working again? Last year was so easy for both. Obviously, you're missing people. But I guess in Miami's case, I wouldn't say that they have an extreme drop-off in who's the next guy behind Raheem Mostert. In fact, I think the world of Devon Achane. And they use him in so many exotic ways where they throw him the ball in the flat. He's literally lining up as a wide receiver. He contributes more than just running the football. But, man, is it crazy to see both of these offenses take a huge step back in the red zone. Again, regression is one thing. For the 49ers, the bottom is just falling out.
Yeah, that's beyond regression. I don't know what the word is for it, but it's not good, and it's pretty damning. And you can try to find the reasons for it, and I think the reasons are numerous, and of course injuries are part of the thing. I had Kyle Krabs, who's phenomenal, does a great job with draft stuff. He's the host of Locked On Dolphins, so we always do our weekly crossovers on the Locked On Network. So it was a Locked On 49ers, Locked On Dolphins crossover. Go check that out. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On 49ers Daily. And Kyle seems to think that the Shanahan side of the tree needs to value offensive linemen more, and I think there are some similarities into, so they're successful running games, and there's yards there, and yards per carry is fine for the Dolphins and the 49ers, and Jordan Mason did a fine job this year, but those late game losses, and you get into the fourth quarter and you have to slam the door, and you need that 4 yards. You're averaging 5.4 yards per carry. But when you really need it, can you get it? Can you displace the defense? Can you create openings and really get yards when you need them? I think that's where the 49ers, in some cases, and you can talk about pass protection as well, they've fallen a little bit short. And I wonder if when Kyle Shanahan goes back to the drawing board early in 2025 and starts drawing things up, and is their philosophy of paying the guys that get the ball in their hands, has it gone too far? Should they lean more into trying to better all 5 guys on their offensive line? You're not going to do that in one off season, and you hope that Trent Williams is going to hang on for a little while. But maybe the philosophy of, okay, we've got to beat you up front, and who the running back is secondary, rather than trying to try to lean on the space creation of the offense and then letting guys do all of the work with the balls in their hands. And I think you would like to have a lot of both of those things, but valuing offensive linemen more was kind of the short answer that Kyle thought could really help out both of these football teams when it comes to being more consistent and closing the door when you need to in an NFL game late. And it's odd to say that about the teams that use fullback more than anybody.
Right. And you know what's funny is more similarities, right? And you talked about it. Tua and Purdy, their roles in the offense functioning, and I think this is why it frustrates fans so much, is because the idea is to get the ball out before there's any pressure. Very much timing. Ball's out, get it to your playmakers, let them make it happen. Chris Forrester believes the same things as well. We want to, to hear the offensive line coach say, we value the guys who score the touchdowns more, right? Like, it's just everyone's on board with that, but it's crazy because you would think the offensive line coach would cape a little bit more for it. But
it almost sounded like someone had like a gun poking in his back when he's saying that, and he knows it's the company line, and he's just trying to find a proper way to say something nice about the organization. I think if you asked him, he would, because remember the story about the Kinlaw draft pick? Yep. Chris Kocurek was like texting John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan over and over, sending them clips like, look at this guy, this guy's awesome, got to get this guy, this is my guy. And like he was he was doing everything he could to try to let them know that they needed more defensive linemen and this was their guy. And I don't know if Chris Forster is doing the same thing, but I don't know if you want to listen to Chris Kasurek anyway after how that draft pick went, because there were some fine highlights for my guy. But yeah, the lack of consistency really killed Javon Kinlaw there. He was physically talented. So you kind of have to have good athletes, but you can't force it either just because the guy's there. So a lot of lessons to be learned here.
Right. And me, I'm a big Simpsons guy. So what I think of is when Smithers kidnaps Tom Jones to perform for Mr. Burns because he's trying to woo Marge and he's got a gun in his back and he's like, that's right, everybody's smiling, we're happy, right? It's just, it kind of feels like that was the answer. But it's funny because the obviously the personnel packages we went through it are completely similar. The philosophies on offense, the philosophy and roster building is the same, and almost the same sort of functionality with the quarterback in terms of asking them to be the point guard, get the ball out. And I think a lot of people have that idea point guard as a disrespect. It's not. It's a function of the offense. Every quarterback at times is your point guard, and that's the idea: is get the ball out quickly. We can mitigate the lack of talent that we have on pass rush, or pass protection by beating them with quicker throws, getting the ball to our guys, having them, back off a little bit, like that type of stuff. But the problem is, and why fans are frustrated, and you know this, Brian, is in the biggest moments when the one play is needed, someone's always just rushing free. And whether that's just them getting beat or a miscommunication. Again, I don't get into the weeds of why. I just get into the weeds of it happened. I don't care why it happened. Don't. It doesn't make me feel better in the Super Bowl to hear, well, that was a miscommunication. I don't care if it was a miscommunication. I don't care if that person got his ass whipped. The point is, it happened. And it happens at the worst times. And I think that's where fans' frustration comes from with that philosophy with pass protection.
There's another similarity here, and I know you have more, but this one is not on your list. And there's the 49ers at times, you go back and watch some of these games and you're like, man, there's just something's off about this team. They feel disjointed. You go back and watch, and it's like even that Shanahan running game that is always so well coached and well timed, it's like it's sloppy. The 49ers are sloppy. And this is a veteran team with veteran players. Like if Ricky Pearsall lines up on the wrong side of a formation, you're like, okay, he's a rookie. He screwed that up. But it's not that. It's veteran players. It's Kyle Juszczyk bumping into George Kittle. And it's like, how are they this late in the season with veteran players that have been in this offense for so long, screwing up some stuff like that?
Or Deebo Samuel tackling Isaac Guerrero?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's veteran players too. And so is there a coaching problem here? Are they trying to implement too many new things? Because there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks, Jason, about the 49ers and Steve Young and Jerry Rice spearheaded this movement of the reinvention that Kyle Shanahan needs to do. But I think he kind of tried to reinvent some things and it didn't work great. So maybe he just has to stick with whatever they were doing that was working before, because whatever happened this year, I think you got to scrap it and either come up with another new reinvention or just go back to the staples, because they're sloppy. It's been happening on the defensive side of the ball as well. And guys go uncovered because there's veteran players that are pointing at each other, and you can't have Hufanga and Fred Warner not knowing what's going on, because then you're really screwed.
Absolutely. And again, the sloppiness is only evident when you see it like on film and you're watching them and you just see it. It's just everything looks a tick off. Everything looks difficult. Nothing looks easy. Even when there's something to be had, there's always something that's in the way. By the way, more similarities. Both the 49ers and the Dolphins have new defensive coordinators this season. Vic Fangio, the Godfather, was their defensive coordinator last year, moves on to Philadelphia. Philadelphia's defense is humming. They look great. The 49ers obviously move on from Steve Wilkes to Nick Sorensen. By the way, I think Nick Sorensen's going to get a year 2, so you guys got to really buckle up for that, just based on the fact that everything that they've been saying. Nick Bosa saying, I love it, let's run it back. Kyle Shanahan saying, I love it, I think he's doing a great job. And the defense has played a little bit better. It's funny what happens when Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga and you get your guys back, and all of a sudden how your defense improves a little, huh?
I mean, when you lose 12-6, it's hard to point at the defense.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Even if the 2 plays are coverage busts, it doesn't matter. It's 2 plays. They allowed 4 field goals. You have to be able to score more points than that. But defensively, You've got a new coordinator for both sides. These similarities are just coming out of everywhere. But last season, under Steve Wilkes, the 49ers were fourth in the NFL in points per game allowed, 18.8. For all the talk about Steve Wilkes, all the talk. The 2024 version has allowed 22.9%. That's 17th in the NFL right now. Miami's currently tied with New Orleans for 13th, allowing 22.3 points per game, and they allowed 23.2 points per game last season. And the Dolphins have been great against the run this season. They're 8th in the NFL, allowing 103.6 yards per game. The 49ers are 15th, 117.8 yards per game. Pretty close, 14 yards difference. Like, it's not something crazy, right? That's like 1 or 2 runs, maybe. San Francisco's passing defense ranks second in the NFL for passing yards per game allowed, only 181 yards per game. Miami ranks 8th with 205 passing yards per game. Pretty close. These defenses have had 2 changes, but for whatever reason, the new defensive coordinator in Miami has turned up the run defense. And that's, if we're talking about, again, back to fantasy football, if you're thinking about firing up Patrick Taylor in this one, sure, the 49ers are going to try to run the football, but Miami's been very good. And Calais Campbell is the ageless wonder. But it's just funny that both of these teams, and I think the perception of how this team talked about Steve Wilkes during the season, at the end of the season, including the head coach, right? He's got to come down in the booth, and we've got to talk at halftime. And Diamador Lenore said, I needed to play here. He didn't listen to me. And everyone, fans, said, we want to get rid of Steve Wilkes. Sorensen's in here, and Sorensen doesn't know what he's doing, and da-da-da-da-da. And the whole team, Kyle, Lenore has been vocal, Bosa, they're all behind him. And it's just funny, the numbers last season were far better, and this year they're far worse. But the locker room and the coach's message implies that he'll be back next season. I just think that those numbers are weird when you look at it that way, and the way that the perception was of both.
I really look at someone like Robert Saleh, and he's obviously going to get a job somewhere next year. I don't know where that's going to be. But one of the things that I feel like is missing, and it's not Kyle Shanahan's strong suit, so he needs somebody else on the sideline to be this guy, is to be the energy guy, to be the rah-rah guy, to be the guy who's flexing on the sideline, to be the guy where there's beads of sweat dripping down their face because they're into the game and they can mentor guys and they can be in guys' face. They can yell at them a little bit. And Nick Sorensen's not really that guy. He's kind of similar to Kyle. And Brandon Staley's definitely not that guy. And he's up in the booth, I think, anyway, right? So, who's that guy? Even if he doesn't coach, I don't even care if he calls any plays or coaches, but bring Robert Saleh in and pay him like a defense coordinator just to yell at guys and flex on the sideline, right? Just bring something else, because I feel like they've gotten a little too clinical potentially in the coaching staff there. And I don't know if there's a simple answer, and it's hard to know if the defensive coordinator is doing a good job or not. It hasn't felt right since D'Amico left, whether it was Wilkes or Nick Sorensen. And I think they could probably, fix that with some talent issues that they've had, especially that second linebacker spot. But what team in the league has 2 great linebackers? Nobody does, except for the 49ers when they have both Greenlaw and Fred Taylor and Fred Warner. Fred Taylor, apologies.
Man.
I just called
Jaguars legend.
Yeah, awesome. Jags legend. He's a podcast.
Can he play running back now? Yeah. Maybe he should suit up on Jacksonville's not that far from Miami.
He could gain 5.2 yards per carry in Shanahan's offense.
Probably 100%. What's Maurice Jones-Drew up to? Let's get him in there too as well. And I kind of wanted to
his Maurice Jones-Drew's body type is 1 of 1, because he's like 5'5", and he's built like a miniature offensive lineman now.
Yep,
pretty amazing.
I'm glad that you brought up linebackers, because Kyle Shanahan was asking, I don't want to talk about Devondre Campbell. I just want to talk about this particular quote, which I found interesting. And he said, yeah, we probably made a mistake, but he was 3rd on our list. And we know that Eric Kendricks bolted for Dallas. That was their first, right? He was intending to sign. Who's the second then? And he never mentioned a name. I've got a name, and you tell me if I'm tripping.
I got a name. Is he a veteran player?
Yes.
An extremely veteran player?
Yes.
Okay. It might be the same name. It's the only
Bobby
name
Wagner.
Bobby Wagner. That was the name of a guy, and maybe the similar reason, but he was the only person I thought, maybe was it Bobby Wagner? There's respect there. And he was a free agent.
Yeah. And then it's no coincidence that he ended up with Adam Peters either.
Right.
And then you have to remember KJ Wright, defensive quality control, and Nick Sorensen, Seattle ties.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of people speculating about Aziz Al-Shire. He was never going to come back because he was going to make, like Aziz the year before set the franchise record for the Tennessee Titans for tackles in a season. There was no way that he was just going to come back here for peanuts just for the vibes. He was going to obviously get a bag.
How did Al-Shire not get a multi-year deal in the first place?
That is baffling. And the only conclusion I could come to is I want to go back to play with D'Amico.
Tomorrow.
Alexa, turn off. That always happens when I do these streams. It's 6:35. I don't even know who set that. I think it's like default, but it happens all the time when I'm streaming. But
I thought it heard you say something. He was trying to talk shit back to you.
Siri does that all the time on my watch. Wait, matter of fact, don't let me not say it name too loud. Yep, it did. All right. But I think Aziz was thinking, I'd rather play for D'Amico. And if you're looking at the direction of both of those franchises, who was more likely to take a bigger jump next year and everyone believed, Houston brings in Daniil Hunter. You've already got this team that you've played well with. CJ Stroud's going to take this leap. You bring in Joe Mixon. Aziz comes in. Like, I think if you're looking at it, it's obviously the coach and who he wanted to play with and the trajectory of both teams. He kind of saw what was going on in Tennessee and was like, sorry, Daniel Brunskill, I can't kick it with you here. I got to get out of here.
Yeah, and it was tough for the 49ers to get a big-time player and be like, but when Greenlaw comes back, you're not going to start anymore.
Right.
And maybe they just left that part out and they're like, you know what, these other guys don't want to sign. So let's leave that part out when we talk to Devondre Campbell and bring him back in.
And I immediately jumped to Bobby Wagner just because of the length of the contract would have been a 1-year deal. And again, the KJ Wright connection, obviously the same thing with Sorensen in Seattle as well. And he would have never, even if Dre Greenlaw came back, would have never complained. And he would have been a great soldier, right? So I think that's the idea of it. They had their idea, Eric Kendricks left. I think they went to Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner chose to go with Adam Peters, which is no mistake. That means they had to have discussed that when Peters was there before, right? Like before he knew where he was going. So there's no mistake with that. And then you end up with Devondre Campbell. But I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that he was the third on the list and didn't give a name. So it left the rest of us kind of scrambling, and nobody puts pieces together and can put conspiracy theories better than 49er fans in any way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I heard him say that, what I immediately thought of was, what about the guys you just drafted? Like, do you not like D. Winters?
Right.
Been a perfect fit for him, half a season. Jalen Graham, clearly they don't like him that much. He was a fan favorite. He had a really nice preseason as a rookie and kind of just disappeared and bounced back and forth on the taxi squad there to the practice squad and back to the main roster. But, and maybe we'll see more of those guys now. Is he back on the practice squad? I don't even know where Jalen Graham is currently.
I think they brought him back up for the game actually too on Thursday. It's just they ended up with DFF because he's higher on the pecking order. They thought so highly of him that they thought that DFF, hobbling around was a better option to get out there than Jalen Graham. So that probably tells you all you need to know. I have a question, and this is kind of delving off of the Miami San Francisco matchup because I think we've highlighted almost every single similarity from philosophy standpoint to roster building to how their season's gone to their quarterback position, everything, right? Do you feel like there's certain positions where it's easier for a rookie to crack the rotation than others with the 49ers? And how much of that is just Kyle's grip on the offense and not allowing rookies in there as quickly as it is on defense?
I think Kyle really does rely on his position coaches as well. So it's not all just Kyle, like he mentioned with the whole Christian McCaffrey thing. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know who's in the game because it's Bobby Turner and basically it comes down to Christian McCaffrey calling his own number. He's like, I'm not coming out of the game. I'm coming back in. And so I think a lot of it is the position coaches too, but when it comes to the 49ers and their players and their depth chart, I just think it's hard for any rookie, especially for an established team. And it's crazy to hear how often, even when guys play, it's like Dominic Pooney's awesome. He might have been a better player on the bench all season long if Spencer Burford didn't get hurt. And that's just the reality of it. It's just you're on the depth chart and that's it. I think actually Nick Bosa, this was interesting. So Nick Bosa was being interviewed. Remember the emo Bosa showed up, which was weird. What was that hairdo? I didn't think it was him. I saw the thumbnail of a video and I was like, I don't know who that is. I was like, is that Nick Bosa? What the hell? But
it's not a phase mob.
They were asking him about the Devondre Campbell stuff. And I think it was Barrows, one of the reporters, said, was he upset not only about Greenlaw, but maybe that someone like D. Winters was in front of him? And Bosa was like, oh, was Winters in front of him too? Was he behind him too? Like surprised that like he knows the depth chart. It's like, you don't just jump somebody on the depth chart. You know what I mean? And it was like, oh, that's interesting that he put it that way because he was so shocked by that. And I don't think he was. I think it was, I think Campbell was ahead of Winters, but Winters went in because Campbell didn't want to go in. And I think that's what happened. And so I think that's kind of what Bosa was telling us by that. But it's like, you just don't jump somebody on the depth chart on this team. Like if you're the guy and you're the veteran, and you're in front, and that's why like people want to see down the stretch, people want to see a lot more of Jacob Cowing. You're not going to see him because he's behind the other guys in the depth chart. That's the way it's going to be. And it's going to stay that way unless someone gets hurt.
You'll get Chris Conley and like it. And funny enough, too. And like, I again, I didn't want to turn this into like a Devondre Campbell thing because I'm just happy that he's gone and everything. But I think it was Guy Haberman. Shout out to Guy, friend of the program, friend in real life, says he figured this out early that it was going to be a problem because after the Rams game, Devondre Campbell was asked why he was splitting snaps with D. Winters. And he said, I don't like it. I have to deal with it. We'll see what happens. And that's your first like red flag of like a guy who you're on your last leg. You in this league, and they're asking you to split snaps with somebody that they drafted. You have to say, no matter how mad it makes you, you have to say, I think what's best for the team. I think the world of D. Winters. I'm ready to do whatever it is the coach is asking me to do. I'm here. No. He said, I really don't like this. This is a shock to me. We'll see what happens. We probably should have seen this coming a little bit earlier on top of his time in Green Bay, right?
Right. And then his latest tweet too, which I still think it's the last thing he's tweeted out, which was on like December 4th. So, a week or so, 10 days before the game. I don't even know what day it is anymore. And he was basically like, I want to actually find the tweet because it was like when you apply it to what he did, he already kind of had this planned out. He was telling you bail on the team. Let me see if I can find it really quick. But and I thought it was hilarious because Kyle was like, we didn't like him that much either. We tried to get 3 other dudes in here, and this is what we ended up with. And it's like, well, why didn't you just play D. Winters, man? You drafted that guy. Play your seat. Develop. There's a little bit of a development problem on the 49ers right now. It feels weird. Yeah. It feels like they were so good at developing players, and it's kind of they've hit a little bit of a. I don't know. They've hit a little bit of a rough patch in development, and if guys aren't already ready to go, then it's like they don't get ready to go.
Kyle says, "Yeah, we probably made a mistake." Oh well, cool. But he's like, we probably made a mistake, but yeah, we had 2 other guys. He was our 3rd option. It's like if your girlfriend cheats on you and you were like, yeah, I probably should have seen this coming, but she was like my 3rd option. You're just trying to save face. Like at this point, you didn't have to sign him. No one was breaking Devondre Campbell's door down to get his services. And my thing is, and it goes back to what we were talking about with cracking the roster, is the rigidness about veterans and not the guys that you drafted or the guys that you are supposedly in love with, because you wouldn't draft somebody that you didn't like. You wouldn't let your organization draft somebody that you, and Kyle's involved just like everybody else. So that is a little bit of an issue. One other thing too is Nick Bosa said that he saw early on that he was going to have a problem and he decided not to say anything. I don't know how that makes other people feel. For me, I just feel like he's not that vocal guy. He kind of leads by example. He wasn't going to say anything. Maybe if that would have happened in front of someone else, they would have said something. But it was kind of interesting to just hear him say, yeah, like I kind of saw it coming, but I just decided not to address it.
Here you go. This is still the most recent tweet from Devondre Campbell, came on December 4th. Quote, no matter what you do in life, people are going to have an opinion about you. So you might as well just do it your own way and live with the results.
All right. That just sounds like, you know what that sounds like to me, Brian? That sounds like the people that use astrology to to justify their bad behavior. Well, I'm a Virgo, so you should know that no, bad people are bad people. It doesn't matter what month you were born. It doesn't matter what the sun and moon is or any of that. Well, I'm an Aquarius, I've got a temper. No. You're just a bad person. And I think this is thank you, Lisa, for the super chat. Winters is like Greenlaw, but seems to get hurt a lot. I think that's my biggest concern with D Winters is, can he physically handle a full season? And can he go through the rigors of playing? You have the mentality that they want, which is flying around and getting your helmet dirty, but can you physically live up to the beating? And that's the part that scares me a little bit with Winters. I don't think it's a skill issue, but availability, best ability, I think that's what's holding him back. And I agree with Lisa 100%.
My last thing on Devondre Campbell, by the way, just because I want to pile on a little bit, because something about him walking out the field and then smiling and being like he did something, it's pretty lame what he did to his teammates and how immediately his teammates were like, F this guy. The most recent tweets, aside from that one where he said he's gonna have to live with the results, which he's now gonna live with and probably never play football again. Like 3 of the next 5 are his own highlights that are retweeted. And then there was the tweet that was brought up from a lot of people that were sent my way, where he's basically like, man, I'm so handsome, I should be a model. Like he's a little bit out there and he thinks very highly of himself. And I think some of it is maybe not earned potentially.
Yeah.
And look, I don't know. I'm not going to grade. This isn't hotornot.com, but he's not the first guy in the NFL. There's a lot of dudes that could be on a cover of a magazine, right? Mm-hmm. Devondre Campbell is not the first name I'll think of. I just put it that way.
Yeah, he's no James Garoppolo, right? Come on. And you know what? Like, football players have to have confidence that kind of borders on delusion, to the point where like you can't lose any of that, even to the point when it's just like you've had like a bunch of rough games, but you still in your heart feel like I'm still that guy. I'm still gonna bounce back. There is that part of it, the mental aspect. But this is just insane for him to say things like this. And and then the other stuff
about Deebo Samuel.
Well, speaking of that, and again, thank you, Lisa, for the super chat. Appreciate that. Well, we'll toss it to this real quick. Francisco says, Jason, do I start Deebo over DK now that Garendo's out? We talked about Patrick Taylor. We talked about Israel and Keyshawn Vaughn. But doesn't this feel like exactly the game where Deebo gets 10 to 12 carries, at least in this game?
He's going to be heavily involved. Is he going to do anything with his touches would be the big question there. And DK Metcalf is just so up and down. It's hard. I'd probably lean toward Deebo because I think more about what the touches are going to be for him. Game flow. We'll see what happens there with both those players, but every pass seems to be going Jackson Smith and Jigba's way right now in that Seattle offense. So volume-wise, I would lean Deebo, and I think it's smart usually in fantasy to lean toward what the volume play is. I would really love, though, side note, to see Izzy Abanikanda out there, just to see a couple runs from him, because I thought he was a really good fit for Kyle Shanahan coming out of the draft last year as a 5th-round pick. And, maybe he just doesn't have it, but I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of that. And I would certainly be more excited to see that than Patrick Taylor. Patrick Taylor's been fine when he's been in there for the 49ers, or especially Keyshawn Vaughn. I just don't think there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in a league that is a dynasty league that counts kick returns is the only reason that I continue to start Deebo, because I looked up after that Buffalo game and he had 20 points and I was just like, how the hell? And I looked at all the kick return yards, so I can't bench him. But yeah, and I think Brian's bang on. Jackson Smith and Jigba is probably the best slot receiver right now in the game. Like at least these last few weeks, he's been good. That whole offense has gone that way. But I was going to ask you this, and it's you bringing up Izzy, is should the 49ers just start to look to poach players off of other people's practice squads and just kind of see what you've got going into like with a 90-man roster next season? Because this season is pretty much up for arms. So like if there's a guy that you physically liked in the draft, or you think that you can get something out of, what's the harm in picking them up now and putting them on the roster?
Yeah, no, I'm down with that. I mean, especially with all these injuries and you've got some roster space with someone that you believe literally can stick on the roster next year. I think it's not cool, and I think there's some, you know, um,
Etiquette.
unwritten rules about that around the
Mhm.
league and doing other GMs dirty by picking up a guy that people have on their practice squad unless you really are giving them a shot and they're going to have an opportunity to play for you. And so, but if that's the case, guys like Izzy Abanikanda, guys that were drafted recently that you like a lot that ended up on somebody's practice squad and give them a look here. Yeah, I think this is definitely evaluation time. I don't know how many guys are actually going to sit to allow the team to evaluate, but especially mathematically, I think you still kind of got to play it out. But once you get to next week and the last 2 weeks of the season, if guys are legitimate, like I look at Fred Warner, man, it's like, dude, get surgery.
Just go sit.
Like, what, you got a broken bone in your ankle? Don't those things heal wrong and then you get more problems? Like, I don't want to have I don't want to shorten Fred Warner's career because he played out this season on a bad ankle. And plus, I don't want to have Fred Warner, he's not quite ready to start practicing and on July 27th when we break for training camp, right? I want to have him 100% by the time the season comes around. So I don't want to have like February, March surgery like with Brock Purdy's shoulder or elbow a couple of years ago, which was super weird. And so I don't know if that would be the case anyway, but yeah, like if Fred's legitimately got a broken bone in his ankle, man, get that thing fixed.
Yeah,
and then
100%.
let's see D Winters and Jalen Graham and DFF too. I don't care. Like let's evaluate some of these guys. Let's evaluate Jacob Cowing, but you can't put Jacob. I'm not going to put. And Kyle Shanahan's for sure not going to put Jacob Cowing just willy-nilly in front of Debo or Juwan Jennings on the field either. So one of those guys will probably have to get hurt.
Yeah, and I think obviously this is an evaluation process, but I think these next 3 games are going to really show you and answer questions for people about, has Kyle lost the locker room? Because are you going to go out there when there's nothing left on the line, and are you going to still play it all? Like, or are you going to be a guy who folds it up and goes home, right? Like, and I think this is what I'll be watching for the most these next 3 games. Who's still putting it on the line? In 2020, when George Kittle came back, I remember thinking, I don't need George Kittle to come back. This season's a wash. But George Kittle is a football player, and George Kittle wants to play football. So how many of these guys do we have in this locker room still that are going to be here a part of this solution next season, are still committed to the culture? Is the culture as strong as we still think it is? And I think that's the stuff that we are going to keep our eyes on besides the evaluation process, is for the people that are weary, whether this team has the message has gotten stale or they're just not following their leader. We're going to find out who the real dogs of this team and who are really down with them these next 3 games, and who are going to really lay it out on the line in these games that really don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Nick Bosa said it best when he said that we're going to find out who wants to be here. And that's what it's all about right now. And that includes veterans and young players. But the reason I want to see some more from, like, especially like, it would be awesome to see a full game from a guy like Jacob Cowing. Like, it would be awesome if there was just one game where the number 1 and number 2 receivers, and not to bench the other guys, but just to see, okay, Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. You have
Rotate them in.
No choice but to give them all the routes and throw the football, because right now there's other places to throw the football. But if you take Debo and you take Jennings out of it, then you have to throw the football to Pearsall, and he's not just getting his cardio in. And so I would like to see that, just because you would have an opportunity to see it a little bit. I think it would give them some confidence going into next year. It would give the coaching staff some confidence in utilizing some of those players, because I don't want to see any of these second-year doghouse situations either. And so you go into next year, it's like, I don't know, who is this guy? We still don't know. We still haven't seen him play. So I would like to see some of that. It'd be nice to evaluate some of these things, but you got to play it out too. I'm not a tank guy necessarily. I think I'm into the elegant tank, as it is sometimes called, where you like the Fred Warner thing, but you already got to see some other linebackers because Greenlaw's hurt. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. You kind of have to, like let's say the Cardinals are still in it, but you're not in it in week 18. You kind of got to play that out.
Knock them out.
Yeah. And so you can't be like, oh, we're just going to put a wholesale everybody in. I think the 49ers are going to play it out strong. And you also kind of want to be like, look, if we'd have screwed up a bunch, watch out, Lions, we would have beat you and we would have won some games in the playoffs. I think that's maybe a statement the 49ers could make next week. Maybe. I don't know if they'll actually make that statement, but I get the idea of them saying, no, we're not going to pack it in right now. We want to still test ourselves against the best this year and see where we're at.
Yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that the 49ers are going to walk to every podcast, Mike, this offseason and say, we're still those guys and we could have beat any of you, even though that it didn't bear themselves out. But we've got about 7 to 10 minutes left, right? Make sure you guys are subscribed to Brian's channel. I know you guys are subscribed to Locked On 49ers and everything as well. Give this video a like on both our channels. We're simulcasting. Make sure you're subscribed to both our channels. But no 49ers discussion would be complete without talking about Brock Purdy. And I think we've done a great job not mentioning him, not talking about anything. But as I said before, nobody pieces things together like 49ers fans. Nobody does conspiracy theories like 49er fans. It's time to put the tinfoil hat on. I'm going to lay this one out for you, Brian. I'm just going to lay it up, and I just want your thoughts. Tom Pelissero comes out and says Brock Purdy is going to want a top-of-the-market deal. He's going to want what he's owed, exactly where he is, slotted in with the guys that are similarly in his production range. Greg Papa, employee for the San Francisco 49ers, says, I don't think he's going to get 50. And then yesterday, we get Tim Kawakami writing an article saying he believes that it's going to come in 45, 50, that range, and that is not going to reset the market. And I find that one particularly interesting because, first of all, the Pelissero thing, that's Brock and his agents. And they're starting the negotiation. That's Brock and his agents.
Yeah.
Papa is speaking for the Niners. Kawakami has never really been a speak for the team guy. I don't think he pulled that out of thin air, Brian. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know who Kawakami would have talked to that's like a mediator in between the two, because what I think of when I hear that is I came to the first conclusions you did. I would guess that Kawakami, the local guy, his sources are probably closer to the 49ers side than the agent side of things here. So, and I don't think Papa's putting it out there because he's like a mouthpiece for the team. They're like, hey, Pop, go say this, and pushed him out on the TV set, right? I think that was more like he talks to them a lot and like, what's this kind of deal going to look like? Oh, probably somewhere right in this range. But we've seen this over and over again with the 49ers. And it goes down to September 1st if they're haggling about $1 million or $2 million. Imagine if they're $10 to $15 million per year apart on a contract. How long does that holdout last? Do you know what I mean? So that's why the buckle up was the first thing I thought of, is because like, if you're that far apart, this is not going to be easy. And the question will be if Brock Purdy will play ball and still come to camp without a deal is the big question. I have a feeling he won't. He's probably, and I know his agent probably would argue that he deserves some back pay for being underpaid for so long. And it really drives me crazy with the economics of the NFL. It's either you're playing for $900,000 or you have to make the most money that's ever been paid to a player of all time. It's like, can there be some middle ground in these contract negotiations? And so it's a little frustrating seeing GMs fold and people talk about market value. And Tua is a perfect comp. And I understand why the agent would be like, well, we're for sure not taking $1 less than what Tua got.
Thank you.
And they should have that stance. But at the same time, that's not market value. That's a closed circuit. Those guys didn't see the market. Teams are afraid to let their quarterbacks test the market, which is why we don't know what market value is, because nobody tests the market. The only quarterback that we know is market value is Kirk Cousins, because he actually gets to free agency. And for some reason, nobody else does. Dak Prescott, nobody bid on Dak Prescott except for the Cowboys. Nobody bid on Tua except for the Dolphins. Nobody bid on any of these quarterbacks that are paid at the top of the market except for the team that paid them. And so it's not market value to me. Those are closed circuit contracts. And I think that they should make this a market value contract. And I think it would get settled a lot quicker by saying, okay, this has to happen before free agency. This has to happen in February.
And before the draft.
Because on the first day of free agency, you might need to go sign Sam Darnold if this goes a certain direction, right? You tell his agent, you're like, look, he's going to be like, we want 65 million. And the Niners are going to say, well, how about 45? Right. I can't imagine how that negotiation goes from there. So the 49ers, I think, should say, okay, go find it. Because I am willing to bet my good name and my all the goodwill I've earned covering the 49ers, doing podcasts, I'm willing to put that on the line and say that there's zero chance a team in the NFL pays Brock Purdy $60 million. So I think that would get, I think it, and like if I had to guess, I could see it being in the 50s, low 50s. I think the Tua, $1 more than Tua is probably what my guess would be today. And I understand why they would ask that, and they would, but it's not, I hear people say market value a lot. That's not market value. None of those players hit the market. Market value is, okay, you're a free agent, everybody can bid. What would that contract look like? I think it would probably look more like Kirk Cousins' contract than Dak's contract. That's my opinion. And I have a feeling that that's the way it would go. And I think that might be the one time the 49ers should, the DeForest Buckner thing, I think was kind of similar, right? Day one, right? First conversation you have the agent, season's over, go find a trade, right? And you better bring back draft picks. So if a team's willing to give you because if you're willing to spend $60 million on a quarterback, that's also, you're willing to trade 2 first-round picks. You know what I mean? It's that type of player. Do teams see Brock that way? I just don't think that would be the case. And I think they would all learn what the market value actually was really quick. And maybe they come back and they're like, hey, this team's willing to trade a second, and they'll give them 51. Be like, okay, well, we can work with 51. Let's sign it. Or the other thing is they're like, hey, someone's really willing to do that, and here's a bunch of draft picks. And the Niners are like, well, I don't think there's that big a difference to Sam Darnold. So let's take the draft picks, and then we'll spend 35 or 40 on Sam Darnold or less. I have no idea what Sam Darnold's making himself some cash, by the way.
He has, yes. And that's another thing is, and I'm glad you brought him up. Sam's making himself a lot of money this season. I mean, he has been excellent over these last 4 or 5 weeks, and he has an arm that can pierce the cold of the NFC North, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Green Bay. Like he can do those things. He's played very well. But the Brian Baldinger comments, and I feel they weren't taken out of context, but they weren't fully laid out in what he meant. What he meant was value. And I'm glad you brought up value, because if you're getting top 10, top 12 value from a quarterback that you're paying less than $1 million, that is insane bang for your buck. Insane. Like that is something that you cannot duplicate, right? So what I think Baldy was talking about wasn't, hey, I'm recency biased, I'm completely in on Darnold being better than Purdy, is I have the choice to pay Purdy 60 and I have the chance to maybe give Darnold 40. The bang for your buck changes. And I think that's the crux of his argument, not so much 1 for 1, regardless of pay, Darnold over Purdy.
Yeah, and I would love to inject Kyle Shanahan with truth serum and know what he actually feels about Sam Darnold, because he might think that it's not that big of a difference. There's a good chance he does, and there's a good chance he likes Sam Darnold like a lot. You know what I mean?
He loves him,
and so that's got to be factored in. And I hate talking because it makes you talk bad about Brock Purdy in this, because I like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is awesome, and one of the reasons the 49ers have been able to build the thing that they have currently, or that they had last year especially, is because you have a quarterback that makes $900,000. But it becomes a very different equation when your quarterback makes $60 million. I still don't see Brock getting that. I think he might get more than you expect, just because that's how these deals come in. If the 49ers end up doing it and don't do anything spicy, I think they probably won't do the thing that I'm talking about and get real spicy with it. But we'll talk again in late August, and we'll see where this contract is, right? But when it's not just and like, name your quarterback, whatever, Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers, or whatever your favorite non-Brock Purdy quarterback is, because they're. And here's the other thing: is this is why teams are always afraid, because you're not just going to be like, oh, okay, well, we just won't sign you, and then you don't have a quarterback. Like, you can't do that. You can't just not have a quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is what happened with Dak, has happened with Tua as well. And okay, so you're like, you don't do anything all off season, and then you're in August. What are you going to do? Go into the season without a quarterback? No, you're going to cave and pay a whole bunch of money. That's why you got to do it in February. You got to start with that. You don't do the Ayuk thing. It was ridiculous what they did with Ayuk. Do it early. Mm-hmm. And if the scale isn't like, say, Darnold versus Purdy, that's not what anybody's talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. And I don't think that's what really Baldy means, or anybody else. But it's Purdy $60 million, and it's okay, $60 million. Well, that's the draft pick we got for trading Purdy. That's Sam Darnold, and it's a Bosa, Trent Williams level contract. That's what's on the other side of the scale. It's not just Sam Darnold. So that's easy to me. And I would take the non-Purdy for $60 million side. And I hate that because I love Purdy and I think Purdy's awesome, but I think he should be a middle-class paid quarterback. And I would be just for science purposes, it'd be really fascinating to see what he looks like on another team. Just like it was fascinating to see what Jimmy Garoppolo looked like on another team. Because remember, he dominated EPA per play too, just like Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy's way better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I'm just saying it's obvious that Brock Purdy was helped by being on Kyle Shanahan's football team with all the talent that was around him. And clearly Darnold's being helped where he's at, and he has a lot of talent around him. He's got a really good coach. But if you flip-flop them as is the same, that's not enough. If you flip-flop them and all of a sudden Purdy's team is really good and Darnold's team is really terrible, then now you have a conversation.
I will say this, and this is where I'll leave it. It does sound like the negotiations are already happening, but they're happening in the media right now. So I do think, based on the fact that the 49ers are not going to be in the playoffs, they can start to talk about this a lot earlier. How this process goes, here's the one thing that I do know. Take Brian's advice, buckle up, because there are names like Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins that are always going to be out there.
Oh, yeah. And I do want to say, you know who hates when agents negotiate through the media? John Lynch.
Yep.
You can't stand it. Yep. I don't think Jed likes it much either, even though the Niners, I think they sneak a few tidbits out to the media more than they want to let on as well.
100%. That's the same thing they did with Ayuk. They were just like, oh, we had this deal out there, so don't blame us. No. I see your games. We see through that. But look, it's going to be off-season content in a few weeks. We would be remiss in our duties, no matter what our podcast schedule is, to not talk about this and talk about every little thing. So I think, for everybody that says, well, is there anything else to talk about? When you don't have a quarterback, when you have this hanging over your head, this is going to dominate. But there is going to be a lot of other stuff going on. Obviously, the 49ers have 3 more games. We can evaluate the process. We can figure out whether this team's culture is as strong as we believe it is or they say it is. And we can start to get into draft profiles. But this Brock Purdy thing is going to be front and center, and it's always going to take it. I'm just proud of us, Brian, because we just dedicated 10 minutes at the end, and we did an entire show talking about things that were not Brock Purdy. Yeah. Not that I'm going to talk down on anybody who is going to do entire shows dedicated to it, who have strong opinions one way or the other. I just think that there's a lot of moving parts with this team, and the offseason is going to be fascinating with how the 49ers choose to go in terms of the retool, rebuild. How do they do this? Is it in the draft? Is it free agency? Is a little bit of both? It feels like the moment before you pivot to the next chapter of the Shanahan era. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the 49ers continue and try to build sustained winning and how they're going to do this with roster construction.
The theme for the offseason is related to the Brock Purdy contract. But my big question is, will Kyle Shanahan put a ring on it? He's never been married to a quarterback in the NFL. Does he want to stay in that bachelor life?
Kyle plays quarterback Tinder. Like he's just swiping. And then, he goes on a few dates and he's like, all right, maybe this might work. And then there's a red flag and he's just like, I got commitment issues.
Yeah. Trey's like, wait, what? I thought we had something. And he's swiping on Darnold behind his back this whole time. Right. And so, so we'll see. Will Kyle Shanahan put a ring on it?
It's trade and stack the towels in the correct order. I feel like Kyle's one of those guys where it's just like the towels have to be at the same level, like sleeping with the enemy type thing. I think that just in my head.
By the way, on a future episode, I'm going to actually reveal it tomorrow. My early guess at what quarterback is the Kyle Shanahan draft crush in this draft class too.
I love that. And you know what? And we'll end it here. Keep drafting quarterbacks every single year. That's just good process, in my opinion. Keep drafting quarterbacks,
especially this draft, because it's great for those middle round quarterbacks, not so much with the round 1 guys. And Kirk Cousins 2.0 is in this draft, so just happens to work out. He's playing Friday.
I cannot wait.
He's playing Friday.
Ooh, I cannot wait. Brian, tell everybody where they subscribe to your stuff. Thank you again for joining me again. I love doing this every week with you, but let everybody know where they can find all your stuff.
It's always fun. Love doing the Aponte pod every week. At BD Peacock on Twitter. Locked On 49ers daily with my guy Eric Crocker, breaking down everything going on with the Niners all season, off season, regular season, postseason, preseason long. The Peacock and Williamson NFL show, also on the Locked On Podcast Network. Myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson breaking down the entire league. So subscribe there. And then the OT with BP, that's where this show is being simulcasted Overtime with Brian Peacock. You can find that channel as well. Subscribe there if you want all the extra stuff, and doing a lot more draft stuff on that channel, usually in the off season.
Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the football game tonight. I'm just going with, like, we only have a few more weeks of football left, so I'm trying to enjoy it all. But Denver against LA in a little while. Make sure you watch on Prime Vision as well too. That'll infinitely it'll boost
Prime
it.
Vision. Love Prime Vision. Oh, and by the way, post game, Croc and I will be going live on Locked On 49ers, do our keys to victory for the Dolphins Niners game as well.
There you go, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your night. For Brian, for Jay, we're out of here. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.